In 2013, I coined the name Grampion, and I gave it to your host, Jim Tracy.
Welcome, folks, back to the Grampion. This is another incredible opportunity we have where Grandpa, that's me, gets to chat with champions. And those are people that I genuinely admire and have come to know across at some period of time. And I look at what they do and what in my estimation makes them a champion. And we got a special one for you today, especially if you're a pilot out there or an aircraft owner or any interest at all in aviation. We have one of the guys who's really responsible for the development and the success and then the maintenance of the greatest airplane on the planet, the Eclipse 500. And again, that's personal opinion, but we'll dive off that clip at a later time. Folks, welcome Scott Bullock he is the CEO of Apex Aviation in Kilo Hotel November Delta, or KHND Airport, Henderson Executive, Henderson, Nevada. Man, welcome. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Glad to be here.
All right. So I met you because we made a decision to not die in a single engine aircraft and moved up into a twin turbine, and
Yep.
that was an incredibly risky move for me at the time. But I looked into aircraft and I said, who do I get to do the pre-buy inspection? I mean, how in the world am I going to know what I'm buying? And they said, oh, call this guy. And I'm like, okay, I like to get more than one opinion. And so I sought out another opinion, like, oh, call this guy and call this guy. And it, after 4 times, you kind of like, hey, maybe I should call that guy. Well, dude, you are that guy, and you flew from Henderson to meet me out in Michigan. But this is more than about pre-buying an airplane. This is about a history of someone who's been helping people with aircraft for a really long time. So I love your dog. Don't worry about it. Happens to all the great guests. Champions all have dogs. So, Scott, I was wondering if you could fill us in pre-Apex. How did you get started in aviation?
Actually, it was the military. I joined the Air Force when I went in at 19 years old back in 1986, and had a 20-year career. Retired at the end of 06, and then I remember saying that I was never going to, in my retirement ceremony, I says, well, I look forward to never touching another airplane in my life. That didn't go so well, obviously.
Of mice and men, huh?
Right. That didn't go so well.
Yeah.
I think it was 2 months later, I was right back on the aircraft turning wrenches. But
oh man! So thanks for your service. I appreciate that. Most
Absolutely.
people, especially during that time frame, sometimes the military service wasn't a very popular thing to do, but we collectively on the Grampion Network, Grampion Nation says, thanks, man. We appreciate your service.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no problem at all. I enjoyed it. It was a great career. I learned a lot. Met a lot of great people. The education was just unmatched, and so.
So tell us what that looks like. What did you do? What was your MOS in the service?
So I was what was I? I was a 2A6X6. It was basically, I went in as an aircraft. Yeah, one of them. I went in as an aircraft electrician.
Okay.
So basically, how I used to always, the joke was, we take care of all the white wires, and all the blues, reds, greens, and grays, and all that belonged to the avionics folks. But
okay,
I was an aircraft electrician originally, and then I was in for maybe 4 years, and the Air Force decided to do more with less. I guess the military did, really. And so they combined us with another career field, which was called environmental specialist. And that incorporated heating, air conditioning, pressurization, and oxygen in on top of the being an electrician part of it.
Yeah.
So wouldn't take that back for anything. I love doing that. I love to troubleshoot. And that's what that job was troubleshooting heating problems, air conditioning, oxygen, lighting, engines and stuff like that. So
Okay,
it
so
was
people
wonderful.
don't understand though what when you talk about pressurization, you talk about HVAC in a really tiny little cockpit
Yep.
or a huge cavernous. If you look
Right.
at the C5, you're talking about a lot of cubes there.
You are. You sure
um,
are.
you're handling all this stuff, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, we're in charge of all that stuff, and if any of it breaks, we got to, keep it maintained and preventive maintenance, as well as, AOG type situations.
Yeah. So
I'm
AOG, aircraft on ground, we're going to have to help people out because there's
sorry.
some people who listen to this who actually aren't fascinated with aviation.
There
But
you go.
when you look at that, you're talking about, so the smallest cockpit you probably ran was like not a, probably an
In the mil-
F-16.
yeah, in the military, my military career, the smallest cockpit I ever worked on was an F-16. Absolutely, that was
Mm-hmm.
the last 3 years of my career.
Yeah.
Other than that, the first 17 years was all tankers, refuelers, and
Uh-huh.
then of course your bombers, the
Yeah.
B-52, the
Right.
B-1, the B-2, and AWACS.
Wow. So where were
So
you
yeah,
stationed? Did you have a, I mean, most people move around a bit. Where were you stationed all this time?
well, my permanent stations were, so to speak, were
Yeah.
Castle Air Force Base, California, which I ended up closing down,
Yeah.
and then moved
Thank you,
to
President Carter.
Altus. Yeah, a little after that, but yeah, you're right.
Okay.
I think it was more Clinton, but yeah.
Okay.
Um, and then I went to Altus, Oklahoma, where there's like one street light, and
Uh-huh.
boy, was that fun. Went there for 2 years, and
Uh-huh.
then I closed that base down. That one
Yeah.
went
So
all
you spent
civilian.
20 years there in a 2-year period, right?
Right, right. And then I went to Edwards Air Force Base. We
Okay.
all pretty much know where Edwards is at in
Yeah.
California. And then from there, I went on a remote assignment to Sotocano Air Base, Honduras, in Central
Wow.
America.
And
And
nobody even knows where that is.
no, and when I got my orders, I had no idea where that is. I had to look it up. I was like, "Where is this place?" And
Do you on the globe and say,
anyway,
"Where's Honduras" for starters?
basically, yeah. I mean, you just it's somewhere down there, right?
Yeah.
But
And you snapped that salute and said, "Sir, yes, sir."
absolutely, and it was
All
one of the
right.
best assignments I've ever had. I can't complain about going there because the alternative was probably Korea, right?
Yeah.
And
Or
90% of
Fairbanks.
anybody, no, Korea, South Korea, and yeah, that's where 90% of everybody does their remotes, is Korea. And I was fortunate. I went to Honduras and played transit alert, so I basically launched and recovered any aircraft, including helicopters, that came into that place.
Wow.
And then after that, I went to Alaska for 3 years and worked on AWACS in Anchorage.
Okay.
And then
Was
I
that in
followed on.
Fairbanks?
No, that was in Anchorage.
Okay. So you spent a winter in
Anchorage.
Alaska, but not at least Fairbanks, because Fairbanks is about 20 degrees colder than Anchorage.
Fairbanks is so much colder.
Yeah.
Yes, that's where Santa Claus is from.
Yeah.
It's cold up there. No,
Yeah.
I was right on the coast there in southern Alaska, and it was a beautiful, wonderful assignment. Met some great people there, and then
Yeah.
my last 3 years, I left Alaska and I went down to Hill Air Force Base in Ogden, Utah.
All right.
So,
Which is a
and then I
great
went from
place
there.
too.
It is. It is. It
Yeah.
was
The Wasatch
nice
Mountains.
assignment. It was
Yeah.
my only time with fighters, which a whole nother mentality in the fighter world on F-16s than what I was used to in tankers and bombers and AWACS. But
Uh-huh.
they're getting it right.
Well, you found your fair share of egos, didn't you?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah. Well, sometimes a pilot with a huge ego is what they call a fighter pilot. So
That's right. That's right. They got the jacket and the cool sunglasses to prove it. So.
exactly. So I have to be careful because I was trained by some fighter pilots. So yeah, I have to be really
Yeah, I'm good
kind, 'cause
friends
they're
with
going to
many
be
of
on the
them.
podcast too.
Oh, okay.
Not this one.
No, all
but a
good. We're all
subsequent
good
one.
friends,
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
all resin. It's all
Hey
good.
man, when you're saving their bacon every time they turn around, that's a good thing.
That's right.
If their jet don't run, it's your fault. But if their jet does run, it's your blessing, man. You took care of them.
Right.
All
Right,
right.
right. And, we've always said, just because it's the only thing that we have to fame is, um, there are pedestrians without us. So how true is
That's
that? Don't really
awesome.
know, but it's all we
I'm
got.
gonna I'm gonna remember that. So you get through the Air Force, you put in your 20, and
Yep.
you said, "Hey, it's time to retire. I'm going to not turn wrenches on airplanes."
Right. That's what I said.
Yeah.
Didn't happen, but that's okay. It ended up being a blessing in disguise. I went and did a short-term stint down in southern Arizona, and for about 6 months, and then I found out that a company called Eclipse Aviation was hiring in Albuquerque, and they were going to put together this great little very light jet VLJ called the Eclipse 500, and little twin engine six place, and I thought, okay, let's see what we could do with that. And so I applied and got a job as a A&P mechanic, and
Uh-huh.
we moved to Albuquerque.
Wow.
Yeah, it
And
was
Southern Arizona versus Albuquerque, you must have felt like you moved out of the oven into not the oven.
right. Yeah, the oven was on warm in Albuquerque. Don't get me
Uh-huh.
wrong, but it was on broil um,
Yeah.
down in southern Arizona.
Wow.
So
All
yeah,
right.
no doubt. Yeah.
So what was your first task? I mean, because this is an aircraft really that's under development, right?
Right. I got to Eclipse when Aircraft 5 was being delivered. Um,
Wow.
so I missed the first four, obviously, but I got there very in the infancy, and I was in the Albuquerque Eclipse Service Center. So I was post production. I was after the aircraft was
Hmm.
delivered to the customer.
Yeah. So
Okay.
you're
So
working
I
out
got
bugs. That hits your troubleshooting, that skill, that talent,
yes.
that I don't know, man. It's a gift
Yeah.
that you have for. I'm, and I'm going to tell people about this in a minute, but it's like when you're sitting on the runway and there's something going wrong, if you're a pilot, you don't know what it is, but I know who knows what it is. So, and that we're going to get into that. But now you're at Eclipse. It's a new startup. You've got all these airplanes that are scheduled for the production line, but some of them are coming back and they got these new bugs.
Right.
Yeah.
They did, and as they came out, we dealt with them, and then shortly thereafter, the owners kind of caught on, the ones that were receiving their aircraft, and they had the same list of squawks as it was delivered. Every
Uh-huh.
plane was broken or defected in some way,
Uh-huh.
with every plane coming off the line. So the Eclipse owners, being who they were, and the JOPA forum that they use, were very smart about it, and they started listing all those squawks so that everybody that came and started picking up their aircraft would just say, "I want all this fixed," before they even saw their airplane. You know, and I think it was a list. I think it was 63 squawks at the time,
Wow.
and they were just minor. It was, but when you pay for a new airplane, you want everything to work and make everything to look good. And yeah, completely agree with that. I would want the same thing. So um,
Well, and two,
every
people
time
need to
plane,
understand that this is the very first aircraft that was designed from the ground up as a twin engine jet for single pilot operation. So
right.
most of the stuff you were doing really hadn't been done before, had it?
No, it was as things were. We had maintenance manuals and all that at the beginning. Don't get me wrong, but there was a lot of times when certain systems would break, and yeah, there was no guidance, right? Or so you'd have to get with service engineering at Eclipse at the higher ups and say, okay, look, guys, the system's broke. We don't have anything directing us on this. And they would help and give us guidance, of course,
Yeah.
and it was kind of it was a double-edged sword, because you had engineers that designed the plane and designed the systems, and of course, when an engineer designs a system, it's not designed to ever break, and so then you had us that were a few hundred yards away in the service center saying, well, that's broke,
Yeah.
so you had a
Yeah,
little
but
bit
I
of
didn't
this, but it
design
was
it that way. Man, it can't be
right.
broke. I didn't design it to
Right.
break.
Yeah. Well, what you're seeing is impossible because it can't happen. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're more than welcome to come down here and check it
Yeah.
out yourself. So, um, but no, it was a great love-hate relationship. And Eclipse was, I'll tell you, I haven't worked a lot of places in the civilian world, but that was a great place to work. I got to
Yeah.
say, if I had been civilian my whole life, that would probably still be up there because it was just great people, great atmosphere. But because of that, they ended up in their bankruptcy, and
Yeah.
every good thing must end, I guess, unfortunately. And but no, it was a great time. Met a lot of great people. Aircraft was wonderful.
Yeah.
You know.
So, it's no secret that the financial difficulties that Eclipse have kind of led to its downfall, its resurrection, its downfall, its resurrection again, maybe, and now it looks like the future's pretty bright for Eclipse with the 550. Especially if they can get some engines going, they got them kind of rolling off partially off the line for the first time in a very long time.
Yes.
But they went through it, and you were there the first time. It was like, hey, guess what, Scott? You don't have a job today.
Right.
How'd that
Right.
go over
Right.
at home?
Well, very supportive family for sure.
Yeah.
And we had a we had a young boy at the time.
Uh-huh.
He was 3 years old, and this was what, February of '09 when the
Uh-huh.
bankruptcy finally ended. The last part of it happened, and we were walked out the door as the last few remaining employees out of 1,500 originally.
Yeah.
So, the bankruptcy had been, the layoffs had happened the prior August to like all the contractors, and November of '08, a few months later, there was a big layoff. And,
Yeah.
but we still, the service center had to keep going because you got to remember at the time, there were 3 service centers we'll just call it, not on the planet, in America.
Yeah.
Albany, New York, Gainesville, Florida, and Albuquerque, New
Right.
Mexico. So, and there was no third parties, no third party service centers, really, or even mechanics. Nobody, if you were not working at Eclipse, you did not know how to fix this airplane. I mean, there was
Yeah.
no outside sales of maintenance computers or rig boards or anything else that you need to fix this aircraft. So when Eclipse went bankrupt in February of '09, it was devastating for the fleet because that
Uh-huh.
meant all 3 company-owned service centers closed down too.
Blink. Yeah.
So you went from having 3 locations and a world of support to nothing
Yeah.
overnight.
So there's this guy I know, his name is Scott, and I think somewhere in there he recognized an opportunity. I mean, out of every adversity comes an opportunity. It depends on your mindset and your champion perspective, if you will.
Well, there was a couple. Actually, I mean, there was an opportunity. Don't get me wrong, absolutely. I looked at it as I didn't know any owners at the time. When you work at a big OEM like that, they keep the technicians, if you will. I was an A&P lead, but they keep us away from the customer. Okay, yeah. They have people called service writers that handle the customer, cradle to grave, so to speak. And so we never meet them. So when the bankruptcy happened, it was one of those things where I didn't really know anybody. I knew some names. I didn't know anything about any JOPA for them. And so regardless of all that, it went bankrupt, went home thinking, oh no, what are we going to do? And but I knew that there was still a fleet of about 250, 260 aircraft out there that were going to get grounded if nobody stepped up and, to take care of them.
Who knew what they were doing?
Who knew what they were doing exactly? I knew at the time we had about maybe 20 mechanics sitting in Albuquerque, unemployed, with families.
Yeah.
So, talked about it with my wife about, well, you know what? Look, we got a lot of planes out there. We got a lot of unemployed. Let's do what we can. And it's just temporary. Someone will buy them, get them out of bankruptcy, and then I can go back and, go back to work. So basically went on Google and, how to form an LLC and, filled out the proper paperwork. And I think I had some help along the way and formed the LLC and I don't remember how, but I got my name and phone number ended up on the Eclipse owner's website. If you need help, if you're AOG, if you have inspections due, blah, blah, blah. So that's where it really started. My phone started getting a lot of phone calls. I would call up one of the unemployed mechanics in town and say, "Hey, I need you to. Can you go to Phoenix and I got sounds like a flap actuator problem, and there's a flap actuator on site that the customer owns one or whatever, and you go there and troubleshoot it, replace it, sure thing, and say I'll put this much money in your pocket and." And I'd buy them the airline ticket and the hotel or whatever it was. And then they'd go fix it, come back. I'd just throw cash at them and then, and then bill the customer accordingly, and is basically, it took what we had. We were paying from, our account, our savings, if you will, to do this, but it was like, that's how you had to do it, and it all worked out though, and shortly thereafter, that was basically the end of February, early March when we started that. In August, if I remember correctly, in August of 2009, Eclipse Aerospace, what became Eclipse Aerospace, bought Eclipse Aviation out of bankruptcy.
Right.
And they took over all the assets. They took over the TCD, the type certificate and all that, production. And they then came out to our facility where we were doing business. And that's the CEO and his right-hand man.
Mm-hmm.
And talked to us about becoming a service center, a gold service center for them.
Yeah. Now, was this in Henderson?
No, that's where I'm getting to. This is a double Eagle Airport in Albuquerque. Okay, is where we are based at. And I remember them coming out, and it was a real quick conversation. It was brief, but it was very concise. And the one thing they said to me is, we would like to make you a gold service center for Eclipse Aerospace. Thank you for all that you did during the bankruptcy. You kept the fleet alive. You kept it from being grounded because the FAA was you were highly visible, and the FAA knew that there were people out there that could take care of it. As best as we could without, we didn't have the tooling, a lot of the tooling and stuff, but and parts were always an issue. But we also, don't get me wrong, we had a lot of cooperation from the people that were still manning the facility in Albuquerque at Eclipse, to where we could still, buy parts and stuff that we needed for AOGs, because they had a vested interest in it too, to keep it going. So that was nice. And that was great. We still were able to work as a team for those few people that were still there. And
when you kept the reputation of the aircraft alive too.
Right. And that was huge, Yeah, that was huge, because if they would have grounded the fleet and there was 260 basically paperweights out there, who we don't know what we'd have today. But remember the CEO and his right-hand man coming out to Double Eagle and talking to me about being the first service center. The one thing they said was, but you got to get out of our backyard. You're kind of in it. And my reply was, well,
thank you. Would you please leave?
My reply was, well, technically I was here before you guys, but that's fine. Okay. Money talks. Got it.
Awesome.
Got it. So then in the meantime, in this 7 months, let me back up real quick. I was able to get some current at the time Eclipse owners that wanted to invest in what we were doing.
Wow.
And God bless them to this day. They taught me a lot. They believed in me and in a idea that I had, and basically they ran the business side and I ran the ops side, if you will. And but they're absolutely wonderful. I couldn't have done it without them. And so we then all talked and we said, okay, well, we got to go. The demographic said we need to go west. That's where most of the planes were at that time.
Sure.
So we were looking at basically Phoenix or Vegas, Henderson. And we spent a lot of time in Phoenix. Mesa, to be accurate. And we spent a lot of time in Henderson. And really it came down to where would people want to go to make their maintenance visit a vacation, a family vacation.
Sure. There you go.
Know? And although they're both very hot, dry places, there's a lot more to do in Vegas than there was.
Yeah.
So, and a lot more and a lot closer access to, the big airport to
way central. Way more central than Phoenix, sure. Yeah. So what year was this?
This was now, okay, so this was all still 2009.
Wow. Busy year.
They came out and visited us in September of 2009, and after that we started looking. And then in June of 2010, almost a year later, we physically moved to Henderson Executive Airport in Henderson, Nevada, obviously. So,
and you had a huge hangar, 6,000 square feet.
Actually, back when we moved here, we had one 15,000 square foot hangar.
Okay.
We could put 13 Eclipses in it. Not workable. Don't get me wrong. That was, I don't ever want to do that again. But
you just can't have a toolbox in there at the same time.
Right. Exactly. So we could fit 13 of them in there. I remember it being full for MBAA one year, and we were just packing them in. And but we were an Eclipse only business at the time. We didn't work on anything except for Eclipse. That's all we were. We were basically the Eclipse guys.
Yeah. And how many employees did you have then? Roughly
10.
10. Yeah.
Just 10. 10, including myself, a chief inspector, myself, a director of maintenance, and then which ended up being Dan, who we can talk about later, and 7 employees. But we all turned wrenches.
Yeah.
Or 7 technicians, I'm sorry. We all turned wrenches. We all went on the road. We did it all. And
so tell folks what it looks like when you say, hey, we went on the road. What's the process that happens through that? I mean, so I'm in Boise, and if I get an aircraft that doesn't start, I'm like, hey, Scott, I'm in trouble. And you can either figure it out on the phone, which you've done many times with me, saying, hey, Jim, you should take your tape off the static ports. I don't know if you remember that one or not, but it was a very embarrassing moment as a pilot. Hey, my starter is out, or whatever. I mean, the flight computer is bad. I mean, just whatever it is. And then what happens when you can't fix it on the phone?
Well, if we can't fix it on the phone, we try to get a good idea of what it is that's causing the problem, whether by what you're telling us, or by sending us the DSU data, which is the black box in the aircraft that records everything, all the data bus communication that happens. And a lot of times we can figure out what's wrong or from that. But basically what we do is we hang up the phone, we gather our equipment, book our airline, all of our logistics, all of our travel stuff. We book all that. We fly to your location, go to the aircraft, fix it, do what we can as fast as we can, fly home, and return your aircraft to service. And sometimes you'll see us and sometimes you won't. That's up to you. But,
this is like a doctor for aircraft house calls, folks. I'm telling you that these guys come in and they are used to traveling and they're used to carrying their tools, especially the specialty tools that you might need. And they come out and they are heroes every time every time I've interacted with your folks on the road, they're heroes. So there you go, man.
That's great. And I'll make sure I share that with them, of course. But like I said, it's like covert ops sometimes, it's we go in and out, your jet's fixed. You don't even know we were there, The only way you know we were there is, your aircraft is fixed and, here's your bill. Right. So, but
there's that.
There was always that. That's the downside. But it's part of what we do. And
So now you've
but
got this business and it's kind of centered around Eclipse.
it is.
But at some point you're looking up and you're going, they're not rolling off the line anymore and they're not scheduled to for a X number of years out in front. And so now you're an entrepreneur who's decided he's got to grow his business. Is that accurate? Yeah.
It's very
And
accurate. Very accurate.
and how did you do that?
Well, in 2015, I took on a new partner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we knew we needed to diversify at that point in time. The Eclipse Aerospace, they were basically upgrading the fleet and they were doing a wonderful job. But that was pretty much locked into what they were doing, only them.
Mm-hmm.
That was not necessarily being shared, right?
Yeah.
Which I understand that. Don't get me wrong, not complaining. It's a major, major overhaul to upgrade a lot of the aircraft. What they did, it was a major undertaking, and they did it. And they did it well, very well. But yeah, we needed to diversify. We knew that, and so like I said, I took on a new partner. God bless him. In 2015, and one of the first things we did was we bought out an avionics shop that was there at Henderson,
Mm-hmm.
King's Avionics.
Yep.
Good old Steve Hayden, he's a legend.
Yeah.
And we bought them out, and so that we could have a full service avionics, doing installs for not just the Eclipses, but as well as all your piston guys, and of course the other jet engines jet aircraft out there. So
yeah,
and
and
that
so
was a big undertaking, but that was great.
Yeah, so for the people who don't speak aviation, when you talk about avionics, what are you talking about?
Avionics, basically, remember the white wires? They're the colored wires, right?
The white wires.
No, they're the ones that are going. Their specialty is air data, pedostatic, transponders, your displays in the cockpit. Basically, everything you're looking at when you're sitting in the cockpit. You can really, their claim to fame would be avionics, because they pretty much have something that makes all of those things go, that makes them indicate what they do.
Right.
And that's encompasses all of their stuff, the
sure.
airframe and the wings and the fuel tanks and the engines. That's all A&P stuff. That's all great, and regardless of what airplane it is, it's all pretty much the same. It's just maybe a different location and a different vendor, and it looks different than what it does on something else. But it's all the same theory, right?
Yeah.
They're
telling you where you're at. They're telling you how fast you're going. They're telling you they're telling you all the information that comes from outside the aircraft. They're telling you inside the aircraft. And
right,
you fix
because
all that, maintain all
because
that, repair all
the inside
that.
of the air, the inside of the aircraft has sensors and computers that have to translate all of that information and send it out so the pilot knows what's going on.
For sure.
And when that doesn't happen, that's bad, right? And they're probably the most important system on the aircraft's autopilot, especially the Eclipse. You know your airplane is healthy if your autopilot works, but when when you lose autopilot, it's sick. And this plane is built around the autopilot, because the autopilot has so many inputs to it that they all got to be functioning. Your pitot system, your static system, your oats, your your baro, everything has got to be there in order for it to work. So it's got to be dialed in. So if you have a good autopilot, your aircraft, regardless of what's wrong with it, is still going to be okay. When your autopilot is sick, you definitely don't want to hand fly this airplane as far as it is too far if you don't need to.
Okay. So now you've added avionics and you've done your first, what I would call M&A, or mergers and acquisitions. You acquired a company.
Yes.
You integrated them into your organization. And then I was just at your hangar. I'm like, that's not an Eclipse and that's not a King Air. That's a jet.
Right.
And so now you added King Airs and other jets. And how'd you do that?
Yeah. So shortly after we did the acquisition with the avionics shop, we bought out a King Air facility that was here in Southern Nevada, and that's all they did was King Airs.
Yeah.
So we took that on, incorporated their employees, and into what we had going on, and made that work for a while. It was great.
Yeah.
We were completely tooled up for another fleet of aircraft, another type of aircraft,
Yeah.
the turboprops, and that opened the door for a lot of other turboprops as well.
Sure.
So that was I really enjoy working on King Airs. We still do this, PT6 is a great engine, and
Yeah.
a lot of variations. We now, as you were saying, we have 1900s we take care of, and we have a G450 that we now manage and maintain, which takes up pretty much most of our biggest hangar that we have.
Yeah.
We have 40,000 square feet at Henderson, divided up into 5 hangars, and real estate is a premium there at that airport because
Oh
there's not
yeah.
a lot of it. But yeah, that one takes up a lot of space. But yeah, we're trying to get into the bigger iron.
Uh-huh.
We know that it'll still be a few years out. Back to your original question of before Eclipse can manufacture more aircraft.
Yeah.
They had enough engines and they had enough to put out two recently as they flew them in. As you're well aware, they flew 2 new aircraft into, was it Tucson we went to? Yeah,
Yeah.
into Tucson at the last EJOPA convention in April. So they had enough to do that, and but they have a lot of plans on the horizon, and
Yeah.
a lot to be excited about. But of course, you got to get there first, right? And
Yeah.
not only for them but for us. So
Right.
we're pulling in whatever we can, whatever we're legal to work on, as far as got to have the tooling, the experience, and the manuals, right? So
And
now
I
the
think
most
you have to have more than that. And the one thing that I have noticed about your place, when having been working in mergers and acquisitions before, I can kind of walk through a place and you get a sense of the chemistry that's there. You get a sense of the culture, frankly, that has been developed. And everybody says, hey, the leaders get all the credit. But the thing that I've found is that when there's a healthy culture, it does start at the top and it starts with servant leadership. And I've noticed that at your place. And then I noticed something that I hadn't seen in any other shop. I'm like, hey, Scott, you got this great tough A&P guy. I mean, he's like, I'm a grease under my fingernails airplane mechanic and I'm bad to the bone. And you've got this dainty little woman who's working alongside him and they're working together. And I'm looking at that and it's like, dude, this is like the oddest combination of people I've seen in a long time. How did that happen?
It doesn't matter. Mechanics are mechanics, technicians. They're special people,
Uh-huh.
and we all have the same goal, and that is
Yeah.
to put out a safe aircraft.
Uh-huh.
Regardless of what gender, what they like, what they don't like, what they look like, it doesn't matter. We all get along. We have to,
Yeah.
and it's like a family. I would try to breed that
Mm-hmm.
family culture, but one thing I add when I say that is that families fight too. But at the end of the day, they still love each other. They move on, and they're,
Yeah.
they're still family. And they
Yeah.
know that regardless of how upset they are with each other at the time, we still got your back,
Yeah.
and I try to, one thing I try to pass along, and I talk to every new employee that we get about this, is build relationships, whether
Uh-huh.
it's the management team with the customer,
Mm-hmm.
or the technicians with each other, or even their managers. Build relationships. Don't be a
Yeah.
number. Don't be a body. Um, that's very important, and that goes a long way.
You're a
And that
person,
I've
not a
tried to
tool.
exactly, and I've tried to do that. don't have an MBA. I didn't know anything about business when I started this thing. It's kind of been like um, peaks and valleys, and it ebbs and flows. But you make mistakes along the way. The important thing is you learn from them. We're human. We're not perfect. I'm certainly not perfect, but we try to do as long as you can keep that relationship. People will continue to believe in you, and
Yeah.
and give you that chance when things aren't exactly 100%. That doesn't mean that they're just gonna walk away from you, because you've established that now. So to me, that's very important, and that's what I believe, that I have the buy-in from the bottom up to the top down, whatever you want to call it. I think the buy-in is there, and it's a culture that we've really tried to create there, and I think it's working for the most part.
Well, one of the things that we talked about one time is I said I'd never seen. You've got a very large percentage of female technicians, and you were like, "Yeah, well, they came to us and they were looking for a job just like the other guys who came in and they were
Right.
looking for a job." And I'm like, yeah, but girls don't come and look for mechanic jobs. And you were like, well, they should, because they handle details better. Their hands are smaller. They have better hand-eye, small, what do you call that when your hands work on little stuff instead of big stuff? And
Right.
you had the foresight to team them together so their skill sets could complement one another.
Well, without being stereotypical, without offending anybody.
Oh, you can't do that anymore. No, it doesn't matter what you say. You're going to offend somebody. So go,
You're going to
man.
offend
Just
somebody, right?
let it blow up.
Right. No, no, women, what I find, I love having, I love hiring women, and the reason I say that is because women are calming.
Mm.
Okay. As you said before, I have a mechanic there that's rough and tough, and I get dirty and blah blah blah. I know exactly who you're talking about. It's funny that you say that,
Oh,
but
that guy.
yeah, that guy, right? No, but women are very calming, and so and planes are
Mm.
very frustrating. It's not always black and white. It's not always cut and dry. Well, this is wrong. It must be this. No, it's not always like that, especially
Yeah.
on the Eclipse aircraft that is data buses and software.
Yeah.
If anyone's ever owned a computer in the last
Reboot.
25, 30, 40 years, you know how frustrating computers can be, because they're all software driven. So,
Yeah.
um, because of that, though, women, the female technicians are much more. They're calmer. They're like you said, a lot more attention to detail. They're very structural. They go step by step,
Yeah.
where a lot of the guys just want to jump to the end, and
Right.
well, the end didn't fix it, so we got to go back to
Yeah.
the middle. Oh,
Yeah.
maybe we need to go back some more. So no, that it is. It's nice. It's love having them. They're all wonderful people, though. They really are.
All right. So, welcome back. The battery has been repaired, and we had our own little computer glitch. Got that fixed and taken care of. But Scott, one of the things that struck me is that no, let me back up a sec. How many employees do you have now? How many employees does Apex have in worldwide, Henderson plus worldwide?
Oh, we got 34 total. 34.
34. And one of
Yeah.
the things that we talk about on the Grampian is that anybody can be a champion. And it really goes to the reason and the rationale of the why you do stuff. And I go back and I look at your story and I see a guy who said, there's 20 guys out of work and I can do something about that. I'm not going to go into an area of, you know, you said you don't have an MBA. Well, I have a PhD. It's called a post hole digger, so I understand. and that post hole digger, I knew how to use that, and I knew how to show other people how to use it. And from that, we created a culture of legacy that was pretty fantastic, and I would hope kind of similar to what you have done at Apex. And now you've got 34 people responsible for lots of families, lots of bread on the table. But more than that, you chose to start this to take care of people.
Yes, that's why we did it first. You got absolutely.
Yeah.
It was the unemployed, the people that had just lost their jobs, in Albuquerque that were looking elsewhere, of course, but couldn't find anything fast enough. And also the 260, if you will, owners, all the pilots, and anybody that was supporting the fleet from a third party perspective, so that's what it was all about. It was basically people, whether it be pilots, owners, out of work employees, whatever the case may be. It was about people.
All right. Well, thanks for that. And that's one of the things that makes you a champion. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted you on the program is not only jet pilots are cool. Let's just face it. Because I are one, I know about that. But the people who keep me from being a pedestrian, man, oops, that's you. So thank you for that.
We try.
All right.
Absolutely.
Well,
we try. We try our hardest.
Anything that you'd like to let the folks know before we close out this edition of the Grampian Man?
It's I appreciate the opportunity to do this, Jim. I really do. Thank you for asking. Glad to do it. It's been wonderful to chat with you. And, if anybody has an interest in wants to see airplanes or has questions about airplanes or needs maintenance or whatever the case may be, we're, Apex Aviation, Henderson, Nevada. We're here 7 days a week. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, here's another picture, ladies and gentlemen, of the guy who did the right thing at the right time for the right reason. He took care of people. That's what makes you, Scott Bullock, a champion. Thanks for stopping by the Grampian. This is Jim, and I am out. When you get an opportunity, subscribe or follow wherever you get your podcast.